Every time I spoke to someone about doing this course, they were like, death doula? Like, what is that? And unfailingly, people would say, man, I wish that someone had been able to accompany me that way when I lost my mom or a sibling or a friend.
Welcome back to the ClearEstate podcast, a discussion series where we get real about estate planning and settlement and our efforts to disrupt old bureaucracy and systems with technology and a little dose of empathy. I'm Davide Pisanu, the co-founder and CEO of Canada's only tech company providing truly complete estate management services from planning to settlement to professional executorship. Settling an estate it's not just about paperwork, and planning an estate is not just about paperwork. We tend to think about the will. Some people will think about the power of attorney, but really this is about stuff. Who's going to manage my stuff and who is going to receive my stuff and distribute my stuff when I pass. Today we're going to think a little bit about the emotional aspects. And we talked about conflict and grief, but it's much more complicated than that. Death tends to trigger and unlock a lot of things, and emotional things, family dynamics, old stories, old wounds. And death can be a great opportunity to come together or fall apart. And there's people out there that are trained to walk families, family members, but also the person that's going through this, the person passing away or the person slowly entering or transitioning through death, essentially, through their end of life experience. Professionals that support each member and that person in that process from an emotional standpoint. Those professionals are called death doulas, and there's more and more of them. I personally knew about doulas for pregnant women, and that would support young families and women through that process, through the birth process. But there's death doulas, and death doulas walk alongside families through that period of transition and all the emotions that are unlocked and that people go through when they experience the passing of one of their loved ones, or maybe not so loved ones. So we're going to talk today with Kim Nelson. Kim is a collaborator here at ClearEstate. She does estate planning. She's a tax specialist. She's also an actress, but she's trained death doula and has amazing stories and wisdom to share. I've known Kim for a little while, and she's an amazing person to talk to. We'll address issues around family dynamics, conflict, the fact that we don't have all the same relationship with death, the fact that as a society, I would say more and more afraid of dying, more afraid of aging, because we're not in contact from a community standpoint with our aging population, and we tend to not see the process of somebody passing away as we used to in intergenerational homes or in smaller communities where we were in contact with the elderly population on an ongoing basis. And so death doulas are a way, I would say, to bring back this sense of this, I would say, wisdom that probably used to exist a lot more within those communities, and kind of like formalize the process of preparing, making the right decisions, and coping after the passing away or the transition of the person. I also know that death doulas are used more and more within the healthcare system. I think they're acknowledged as a big part of support for families and as kind of part of the broader team of caregivers, but they're also supporting caregivers themselves who deal with these issues on an ongoing basis and have to deal with the family members and have to deal with the emotions surrounding the process of dying and the transition of not only the patients but the families. So we're going to talk a little bit about these unsung heroes of everything around transitioning, passing away, and we're going to hear some amazing stories by Kim. So join us. So over the past 5 years, I've had the privilege of meeting amazing professionals, specialists in the estate space, who on a day-to-day deal with difficult issues, both planning for death, but also dealing with death, grief, and the family reality and the repercussions of death. We welcome today Kim, who's a collaborator at ClearEstate. She is a lot of other things, but works on our team as a specialist, legal and tax. But that's not why we're talking to Kim today. Kim is a death doula, and that's what we want to explore. So welcome, Kim.
Hi, thank you. It's fun to get to talk about this.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. I know you have a fascinating journey, but how did you? So first of all, what's your background, and how did you decide to invest some of your time and your energy into this thing, which is a death doula practice?
Yeah. So I trained as a lawyer. I was living in Montreal and I got my law degree and I started working as a tax lawyer in the private sector. I worked for a national firm. And I was doing that for a while and just found that I was dissatisfied. It was taking up a lot of my time. It was taking up a lot of my energy, and it just didn't feel aligned with what I felt was important to me in terms of what I wanted to do in the world or how I wanted to serve. And so I made this really drastic shift. I had started acting as a way of, just finding a bit of release and joy, kind of as an extracurricular thing. And I started acting and realizing how dissatisfied I was with tax. I figured I need to make a move. I don't have anything specific planned, and the acting was going pretty well. So I decided to leave Montreal, move to Toronto, became an actor. And while that was great, it was still not quite uh, filling everything. And at the same time, I had experienced a few deaths the prior years. My father and my sister passed away within 5 months of each other. And obviously, that was a huge blow. And, I'm here in Toronto, I'm on my own. Um, and my mother gets sick as well. She starts to develop dementia. And one of my friends mentioned that she had done a doula course, a virtual doula course. And I thought to myself, I'm coming to the point where I'm going to face death again. And I want to be better armed than I was the first two times, both in terms of planning, but also especially emotionally. And so I decided to take this course. And it was the best thing I did. The way that it helped me navigate the loss that was going to come again was incredibly supportive and healing. My mother had a beautiful passing, and I was able to navigate it in a healthy way for myself and for the people around me. And I thought, what an incredible service to be able to offer someone else. And every time I spoke to someone about doing this course, they were like, death doula, like, I don't, what is that? And unfailingly, people would say, man, I wish that someone had been able to accompany me that way when I lost my mom or a sibling or a friend, or, even people that are just caregivers. Caregivers are sometimes the ones that neglect themselves the most, even professional caregivers. And so the doula can come in and kind of be that outside source of support. It's non-medical, but who can really listen to what your needs are, your beliefs, your desires, and support you. So that's kind of how I found myself. in this.
Amazing. I mean, I'll ask you the obvious personal question. How do you have these conversations over and over again in the same way that a caregiver would not take care of themselves? Like, how does that impact you emotionally?
Well, I mean, obviously it can be difficult. Sometimes there's a lot of conflict often in families, and it's managing a lot of um, grief that can manifest as anger or resentment and miscommunication. Um, but at the same time, it is so incredibly rewarding when people are able to find peace with death, when the person who's transitioning is able to make peace with it for themselves and also leave behind a meaningful legacy to the people that they love. The I don't want to call it recognition, but the level of just the people who feel that they've really been supported in itself is rewarding, but also I take care of myself. Like do somatic experiencing, which is really getting into my body, letting grief or emotion move through it. Either by gentle movement, exercising, taking walks, nature baths, just doing things that really connect me to the things that I love and that are part of my resourcing of myself and my personality, the things that really bring me joy.
You're talking about supporting the person that is going to potentially die, but also the family around.
Yeah.
What's Talk to me about that? Like, how's that different? And how do you reconcile all of that? I mean, I don't, I'm assuming there's a secret sauce, but don't reveal your secret sauce. But first of all, what's the difference between, and obviously there's a difference between if you're facing your own death versus the death of a family member, but psychologically, what are the different things that different people go through and how do you navigate that?
Okay, so we don't die alone, right? I mean, we die alone, but it has an impact on our environment, on the people that surround us. So as a doula, you're there to support both the person who's transitioning and the family members. So supporting the individual is most of us are terrified of death, right? Most of us are kind of fighting tooth and nail not to die, to stay young, to, live as long as we can, to kind of push that thought away, to not have to deal with it. And so a big part with the person who's transitioning is kind of addressing what are those core fears and helping them to move through it and embrace death as a part of life. It's transition, right? There's no darkness without you can't see the darkness if there's no sunshine. You can't see the good if there's no bad. And life is life and death. It's just a cycle, right? And it's the most natural thing, but we've lost touch with how natural it is because everything in society is trying to preserve life and extend life and, validate youth, right? And we've lost traditions surrounding death, like death rites, communities coming together to support the elderly, and to learn as they're transitioning and to just to sit with death, right? Um, and so it's helping the individuals that are transitioning to reconcile with something that is so perfectly natural and to take agency over their death, to be empowered to decide in as much as you can. There are certain things that are beyond our control, but there are a lot of things that we can decide on. We can decide on how we want to leave this world. We can decide on making peace and giving comfort to our family members. We can decide on leaving things really organized in a way that for our family members, it doesn't feel like a burden, but it feels like an honoring of wishes and an act of love, or for caregivers, just an act of service, right? Because I hesitate to always say loved ones because sometimes it's not a loved one, right? Um, and on the family side, as they're coming to face death, all of those things, the slights, sometimes, the resentments start to come out because everyone's fragile. Everyone's realizing that this relationship that they had is coming to a term. And it tends to bring up a lot of panic sometimes, or just kind of this, what do we do? How do we navigate this? So with the family, it's partly giving them practical things to do so giving them the resources in terms of, and also the person who's transitioning in terms of planning. Like with the person who's transitioning, it might be like their advanced care plan. It might be looking into what hospices they might be thinking of going to. Do they want to die at home? Do they want to die elsewhere? And with the family, it's giving them the resources in terms of I provide support, but maybe they need, more support. So grief resources, somatic work that they can do, exercises to take care of themselves, facilitating communication between family members, so that they can have useful, productive talks about what needs to get done and how they're going to manage things. So facilitating those conversations, creating like being a container for them, but also being kind of a bit of a mediator or a guide, in order to help them have these conversations. And also advocating, with caregivers and with what questions should you be asking, or you're allowed to ask these things. You're allowed to have more information. And if you can't speak for yourself, then a doula might come in and help with the communication with the medical staff. Again, it's non-medical, it's just facilitating communication. So there are a lot of ways in that way of supporting. And for the person who's passing also, sometimes we do legacy gifts. So if they want to leave, letters, or if they want to create something for their family to remember them by, or even help create a ritual around the death, schedules for the vigil, how that's going to happen. So we facilitate both of those aspects, both the family and the individual.
Lots of thoughts, interesting. But one thing is both my parents were healthcare professionals and worked in geriatrics for a lot of their lives, and one of the things that my dad used to say all the time is, to your point, we used to have rituals and communities, and not only was death much closer, but age was also closer. Basically, even as a child, you would see old people a lot more, in the small community than today, where old people are a bit more boxed in. Grandparents are either at home being taken care of, but not within the family unit, and or they're moved to an institution. Then you visit them once a month, and that probably feeds a little bit the fear of death up to a certain point, because you're just not living with it on a daily basis and you're not seeing the process. It cannot be so traumatic, I would say, for families. So interesting that you're pointing out the same thing, which is we're losing over time touch with the natural cycle.
Yeah, and we used to like live intergenerationally, right? Like your grandparents lived with you, so you saw them age and you saw the changes that happened in their bodies, which also made it less scary for us, right? Because you were witnessing it and, absent a traumatic or really difficult death, you saw people's bodies shift and there was still the respect and the inclusion in the family. And there wasn't also the fear that you were going to be left alone, when you got older, and that you might die alone, and if it wasn't your actual family, there was still community. Because something that I see a lot in the work that we're doing right now is there are a lot of families now that don't have kids, or, that don't have kids anymore. And maybe they're estranged from siblings, and it's terrifying because they think, like, who's going to take care of me? I'm by myself. And when you're doing their advanced care plan with them and you're saying like, okay, well, who's going to be your attorney for care? You just see this kind of terror in their eyes because they're like, I don't know. And yesterday I actually had a client that said, I think it's going to have to be the public guardian. And they said, are they nice? Do you know if they're nice? And it was kind of funny, but it was also heartbreaking because it was like, this is who I'm going to have to depend on. And I don't know if they're going to care about me enough to make sure I'm actually okay, or whether they're just going to stick me somewhere, you know? So yeah, it's a shame that we've lost that feeling of community surrounding death and aging.
We talked a little bit on a previous podcast about incapacity.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming it's not because you're incapacitated in some way, shape, or form that you're not also dealing with emotions that are, through this transition. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think that's important, because most of us will live through some form of incapacity before death.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things is again, it's about not shying away from it. Um, Something that I often tell clients to do, for example, is, if you've got a good relationship with the people who are going to be your caregivers, or if it's possible to do, when you're talking about general events, when you see something happen to someone, or something happens in a member of the family, or you see something on the news regarding how someone's lost capacity to do something, um, sometimes it's as easy as, man, if I was in that situation, I really, I'd prefer this or this or that. Or sometimes just putting down thoughts, if I lose capacity temporarily, like I've had an accident and I'm temporarily incapable of making decisions, what's important for me. And if the capacity is longer term, what's important for me? And what's important for me is like in terms of, it sounds silly, but if I can't express it, who do I want around me? Like there are certain people that annoy the heck out of me. And they're like, yeah, we're friends, and they were going to want to hang out. No, I don't want them around. I don't want that voice or whatever.
Here's the list.
So
Here's the list of people that are not allowed
no,
in.
but I mean it's almost silly to say, but it's true. Like it's you no longer have the capacity to filter. You're already dealing with such a profound transition. And all of your energy, because as you rightly pointed out, just because you're incapable doesn't mean that you're not feeling everything, right? And just because you can't express it doesn't mean that you're not feeling everything. So just simplifying things so that you can focus on this really important part of your life, or just so that you don't have additional irritants, you know, um, to an already emotionally draining and energetically taxing time. So having a lot of conversations, I would say, I think that's a thing that's the most lacking. And if you can't have the conversation and it feels like it's not possible to do that, just document as much as you can, whether it's a recording, it can be a video, it can be writing, it can whatever form you want is an advanced care plan.
I know that I would like to die at home.
Mhm.
I think most people. Well, I assume that most people want to, and there's a survey out there that said 80% of Americans I think want to pass away at home.
Yeah,
You're talking about control. You talk about decisions. I'm assuming a death at home more likely to be peaceful and maybe comfortable for the person. I mean, obviously, we don't have absolute
yeah.
control. Um, but is this something you find? Do people think it's important to be able to pass away at home, or as you call it, transition? And is there something that healthcare professionals can do to help?
I think that yeah, most people want to transition at home. It's an environment that they're familiar with, that they're comfortable with. There's not the constantly, people walking through hallways and all of those disturbances that make it hard to sometimes
Noise.
noise. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there are a few things. I mean, healthcare professionals, the family has to have really important and clear conversations with healthcare professionals in terms of how can they make sure that the person is comfortable at home. What is it possible to keep the person really comfortable at home? Because sometimes it's not, depending on what they're going through. But having a really clear conversation and healthcare professionals being really clear with families as to what is possible, how the situation is going to evolve, because the family has to be able to handle what's coming too. So preparing them really carefully in terms of um, what that particular death might look like if they've got an illness and, what's going to happen. And again, if it's possible actually to keep them comfortable at home. And part of the thing, people say, I want to die at home, but this is another part of why it's important to start having conversations early on. You say that, but if you've got a multiple story home, and that's not useful or for your caregivers or for, care, what is that going to look like? If your caregivers can't be there all the time, if it's family members, you need to have the money to pay for, private care to come take care of you.
Full-time care, yes.
Yeah, because PSWs are great, but I mean,
Mhm.
there's still a cost attached to all of that. So, you have to be able to plan and make sure that there's enough money set aside to be able to honor that wish. So there are a lot of, and again, in terms of the actual space, how are you going to remodel the space in order to be able to take care of that person? If you've got a few people, family members, what are you going to do in terms of scheduling to make sure that the person is always looked after? who's gonna, make sure that there's constant communication with the healthcare professionals to make sure that they die comfortably at home. And then also having a conversation about what is the environment going to look like at home, right? I mean, maybe they don't just want to be in their bedroom. Maybe they want memories around them. What's going to feel good? Maybe they want a certain type of music, And so just there's a lot more planning than just saying I want to be at home and I want to die at home, right?
Especially for the family. You talked a little bit about conflict in the family surrounding death. Maybe I'm just being, or I have a lot of preconceptions, but I'm imagining that if there's a lot of conflict in the family leading to and around this period of transition, it's probably because there was something inherent about family dynamics that led to those conflicts.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just going to solve itself. So, tips and tricks, like how do you deal with that, given the fact that there's probably some level of dysfunction already present in there?
Yeah. I mean, depending on how intense it is, there are going to be conversations with the family kind of sussing out where everyone is at the beginning. And it's a time where the family's going to have to come together, if that's possible. So one thing that sometimes we do is like schedule conversations, schedule when the family's going to get together and have conversations, and create boundaries around that. So in terms of time, but also in terms of, kind of like you see in couples counseling, like one person gets to talk at a time, you're not interrupting the other person. But also make room for the fact that your experience with this person is not the same as other people's experience. And it's really hard to judge that when you're outside of it, as even if you're a family member. But judging what the dynamic was between that person, you only know what you know, but you don't know the intricacies of what that person felt, what the dynamics were, how information was perceived, how it was interpreted. So, during these conversations, I kind of ask people like, put your ideas of what should be aside because that's not like, the same way that you want your experience to be recognized and to be respected, the other person's experience deserves that too, even if it's hard to hear and even if everything in you wants to like launch across the table and throttle them or, leave the table. Um, you have something common that you're working towards. And so the focus needs to be on that other than your personal, issues with either the other family members or the person. And there is something about working together towards a common goal, and they say like the
Mhm.
best way to get people to work together is to give them a common enemy. I'm not saying that death is the enemy, but giving them something common to work towards sometimes also allows for different things to surface, and also allowing the space for people to express what their reality of the relationship was sometimes brings up information that the other people really weren't aware of and didn't understand. So there's a lot of that, trying to manage that and trying to say, we're not going to fix all the problems of the past. That's impossible at this point. But how do you need to move forward in order for this not to be another thing that's going to come and contaminate the already super pervasive grief of loss?
Very powerful. I was going to ask you, you're already very inspirational, but I was going to say, do you have an inspirational transition story that kind of like is how we should all aspire to go through that moment? Or are they all different and they're all inspirational because there's always something touching there?
Yeah, I would say, depending on people's beliefs and on people's desires and people's personal dynamics, there's always something like kind of incredible and it's not necessarily incredible, like it was the most peaceful death and everyone was happy, but there's always some kind of grace, I think, that can be found if one's willing to look at it. But talking about conflicts and all of that, there was this family. There was a mom and the dad had passed away a long time before, and she had two daughters. One daughter was born way, way after the other daughter, much younger. And so the mom and the daughter had kind of been very close. She was a late baby and kind of a miracle baby kind of thing, and just a very close relationship, but also a relationship where the younger one is just doing a lot of the work as the mother gets older and, is the one who's present. And the older sister had moved to a different city. And that sister is like more Cartesian, everything's black and white, right? Like it's this way or it's that way. And the only place where she wasn't very black and white was in cooking. She was this kind of inventive chef, who cooked by smell and all of this. But the two daughters tended to get into a lot of conflict. And this was some stuff that was from, way before. And the mother was very old school in that, she didn't want to burden her children with decisions and she didn't want to burden her children with too much information if things weren't going well. But there came a time where the mother was getting quite a bit older and uh, the daughter that was kind of more taking care of her was going through her own life stuff. And she asked her sister to take care of the mom for a little while as she sorted her stuff out. And the other sister's making quite a bit of money, like she's a well-to-do person. And the mother goes and stays with her for a while. And, the younger sister's getting these messages, oh my God, mom's driving me crazy. And, like there's so much to do. And I had to hire caregivers and just like downloading all the time. And the younger one's like, yeah, copy that. I know. Like, I know what this is. Um, and so the older sister was paying for the caregivers and all of this. And the younger sister had the power of attorney for the mom and would send her money from time to time to cover the expenses. And at one point, the younger sister kind of got overwhelmed with life, and the older sister was started sending her messages like, "You haven't sent me the money. Where's the money for mom?" And the younger sister's like in her head saying like, "You have more than enough money. Like it's coming. I'm busy." And so it just started to create more and more conflict. Every time these two sisters met, there was just such, just the personality thing where one is more emotional, the other is more Cartesian. They try to talk about things regarding the mother, and they would be just clashing all the time. And at one point, the mother starts to really she's slipping into dementia and she's not doing well. And I think partly because of the dementia, she kind of let her guard down. And one day, the younger daughter is visiting and they're all watching TV. And the mother, for the first time, she says to the younger daughter, can I ask you something? And the younger daughter is like, sure. And, the older daughter is watching TV because she's tired or whatever. And she says, I think I'm losing myself. I, and I'll call her Lilu. I'll call her Lila, let's say. And she said, I know Lila's still there, but I can't find her and I feel like she's slipping away. And she starts to cry. And the older daughter just goes like, Mom, you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it. You're fine. And wants to put her to bed. And the younger daughter goes like, no, you're going to turn off the TV and we're going to listen. And she proceeded to talk about how if she has forgotten herself, how is anyone going to remember her? And that she's terrified because she doesn't know what happens once Lila's gone. Super hard conversation, you know. And the older daughter listens, not making eye contact. She can't. It's not an easy thing for her. Anyway, the conversation ends. The younger daughter puts her to bed, and the older daughter proceeds to have like a massive migraine for 2 days because it's just emotionally overwhelming. But just that opening um, started creating conversations between the younger and the older daughter, kind of focusing on the mother and, what could be done. And this is why I'm saying like the common thing to work towards. And they're fighting a bit less. And at one point, there's this, while they're talking about it, the older daughter says to the younger daughter, I'm so sorry for these messages that I've been sending you about the money. And she said, I'm terrified and I feel like I need help. And it felt like the only thing that I could say that felt like help, like the asking for help. It wasn't about the money. I feel overwhelmed. And that gave the younger daughter such a different perspective, right? Because the rest of the time she was like, you're just being a dick, like, um, and so, they started having more and more conversations. And it was interesting because, they had this generational gap and they were able to share different things that they knew about their mother. And so when actually came the time that the mother was started to really decline, like the younger daughter before would never try to, when she came over to the older daughter's house, would never try to change anything because she didn't want to start fights. She didn't want conflict. She didn't want, because they always argued about everything. And so the younger daughter says, "Do you mind if I kind of rearrange mom's room? Because there are certain things that I know she likes." Um, and so the older daughter was like, "Sure." And so the younger daughter brought in plants and mood lighting and lanterns because she knew the mother was very kind of, loved like beauty and a little whimsy and all of that. And like, those things that cast shadows on the wall in different shapes. And she said, "I think I'm going to make mom a playlist too." And the older daughter knew their parents from, way before when the mother was quite a bit younger and was like, "Oh, she loved these songs." And so it became this collaborative thing of creating this playlist for their mom, which they played, over and over as they played as the mom was starting to agonize and going into the periods of, where she was like the death rattle was starting and all of that. And the younger one climbed into bed with her mom, and the older one was sitting on the other side, and they vigiled together. And at one point, the older one, left the room, and the younger one, instead of feeling abandoned, understood that it was just that was her way of being able to manage, right? And the mom passed in the younger one's arms super peacefully. Um, and, the younger one went to get the older one and told her, and the older one went into, "Okay, let's go to, let's call the funeral home. And let's like, and the younger one was like, "No, like we get the chance to say goodbye to mom our way." And the older one wasn't very touchy-feely, but the younger one went to get some water and just started washing off her mom. And the older one joined in without asking. And it was such a beautiful moment watching them care for and love their mother in that way together. And then they dressed her really beautifully. The funeral home came by to pick up the mom. And then the younger one started worrying. And, she told me, she was like, I don't know what it's going to be once we get into the paperwork and all of that. And the younger one, because, again, who she is, ended up by organizing the funeral and all of that. And she was putting everything together. But the older one naturally, it just became this dance where the older one started just cooking all of these wonderful little dishes and making sure that the younger one was fed as she was, and she was learning to contribute the way that she could and learning to express her grief and love in a way that she could that supported the younger one. And the younger one could also recognize that and fill something that the older one hadn't felt in a long time, which is one of the root things, the reason that they got that the older one was she felt unappreciated and she felt unseen. And the younger one was able to provide the appreciation and all of that. And it's strange how this death and being able to talk about it and being able to work together actually brought them closer. They had never had a great relationship, but I would say that to this day, they're so much closer. It's not a perfect relationship, but they're so much closer than they have ever been. And they can support each other and they can help each other and understand that it might not be the way that they would want, but it's the way that the other can. And being able to understand that can be enough.
What a story.
Yeah.
Kim, thank you so much for that. Briefly at the end, how do people get engaged with death doulas? Do you look at death doula online? Like how does that work?
There's the End of Life Doula Association in Canada. So doulas aren't regulated yet because it comes from a tradition of, it comes from a more organic kind of community tradition. It's not regulated, but there are associations that have come together, and there is regulation that is kind of starting to be looked at. Um, and so there's the End of Life Doula Association of Canada, and they have on part of their site now, you can actually they provide links to some doulas that have done their training, and that all criminal checks and all of those things are done all the time. There's the Doula Association there's the End of Life Association of Toronto, of Ontario, the Doula Association of Toronto. And I think there are associations that are popping up in different provinces as well. And also, a lot of doulas, they're self-employed. So they've started their own websites and their own businesses. So you literally can type like where's a doula in my region? And you'll likely find some people, and it's always just, but the same thing you would do with any professional. You read reviews and get a sense of who you would like and meet them because it's a relationship like any other relationship. It's doulas are trained to kind of adapt to every situation that they're in and work to. Um, but still, look into kind of the testimonials and and meet with the person. But yeah, you know, you can actually look up doula associations in Canada or in your province.
Yeah, and I know some doulas work with healthcare organizations, institutions, hospitals,
Yeah.
long-term care facilities. So I'm assuming through that network as well, you can find somebody.
Yeah, some hospices are actually also like, referring doulas or even I think I've heard that some of them are even maybe starting to pay some doulas to help. Because also there's the other part is that, and this is something that I forgot to mention, doulas become really important post-death because, friends, family, concerned people, whatever, are generally there for the first couple of months. But, after that, everybody kind of moves back
Mm.
to life. And so they can provide ongoing support when everyone else is gone um, to the families and to the people that are left. And there are professional caregivers that really grieve the loss of people too. So they can provide that support. But yeah, online or the End of Life Association of Canada
Okay, and Ontario.
and Ontario. Yeah,
Thanks, Kim. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast. That was great. Thank you.
my pleasure. Thank you.
We end each episode with a little chat. Sarah, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Sarah is the head of estate planning and settlement solutions at ClearEstate, our guru, resident guru on all things that we do and talk about here. Very interesting conversation with Kim. Obviously, she has a lot of empathy, a lot of experience. She's super thoughtful. But in your words, what's a death doula, and how have you seen it integrated more broadly in the process of estate administration?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kim is just so great to talk to. I mean, she has so much insights into these topics, and I think it is, death doulas, while they're becoming more prevalent, I would say it's still like relatively new in terms of like if people are aware that they even exist and how they work and things like that. And I would say most commonly, obviously, you see them more with kind of illnesses and kind of advanced age diseases, things where there's some predictability to, a death being somewhat imminent. And I mean, we have birth doulas, and I think everybody is pretty clear on what those are. And I honestly don't see them as being that different, in the sense that, they're there to essentially help you through and help your loved ones through as well. The non-medical kind of components of the process and the transition. And I mean, I think birth doulas, maybe there's a little bit more overlap with medical, but even birth doulas are transferring care to a physician for if there's medical intervention needed. So, I just see it as an additional support of that final transition.
I mean, I asked that question from Kim, but I just want to ask it from you as well, just because you've been in this business for a while. What's the most positive end of life experience you've seen, or journey you've seen? Because
Yeah.
we hear about these horror stories all the time, but would love to hear like what's your, oh my God, that was inspirational, that was amazing, and if I could plan my own death that way, like I would want it to be like that.
Yeah, that's a hard one. So, and unfortunately, when you work in a state settlement, you see a lot of the opposite kind of stories. Unfortunately, that's the reality is. Is, I've seen a lot of families, fighting even before someone has passed away, right? And that always is I would say, one of the worst things to see is that, that there's there's fighting even before, the person is kind of in the ground, as they say. So, I honestly would say that I think people want to leave this world when they think about it on their own terms, you know? And I think that their family members want to see them l- being able to do that, right? Whatever that might mean. So I think having a scenario where, you have the time, to actually see your loved ones, to have some time for, reflection, reminiscing, positive energy. These are the cases that I find the most inspirational is that, people show up and they, I mean, to a certain extent, kind of also like say what needs to be said or say those things like get out those messages that you did you tell them you loved them, like I mean that's a thing, like people don't haven't always expressed how they feel about someone, or parents telling their children they're proud of them. And I've seen a lot of cases of those things occurring as well, that I find inspirational is just having that time. And also I've seen a lot of similar to kind of Kim's story of family members like supporting each other through the process and kind of being the different roles that they, need to be based on what skills or proclivities they bring to the table, right? Which is different for everybody. And if it's, this particular person is going to write the obituary because that's, they have a way with words and their state of mind is going to allow them to do that. And this other family is going to, organize the details of the celebration of life. And just seeing families come together really at the end of the day is what I find inspirational in those moments is, everybody leaning on each other, being around each other. And also I'll say too, because like my own dad passed away when my kids were really small. My youngest was actually just a newborn at the time. And allowing the kids, to come in and be involved. And also, kids, they tend to bring so much like love and light and levity, and allowing them to kind of be part of things, even though they're not somber because they're kids, like just allowing that to also kind of organically, occur, I think is a beautiful thing as well, right? Like, let's all have a good laugh. I mean, what else is there really?
Yeah, I think some deaths are easier, or the space is created for that laughter to happen. Others is so tragic.
Yes.
A friend of ours, a friend of my wife, actually passed away at the age of, I think she was 34, 35, 36, something like that. Aneurysm, uh, young daughter, bam,
Yeah. Just
24 hours, boof, gone. I can tell you the funeral, there wasn't a lot of laughter there.
yeah.
And I also come from a culture, and some cultures are like that, where there's a feeling that the funeral is not a place for children, where it's very
Mhm.
interesting you're pointing out where, well, actually, it is a place for children because
Yes.
children bring joy and they bring a sense of renewal as well, and that life continues. So it's very interesting. In your experience, how does estate planning play a role in alleviating a portion of the grief? How can a proper estate plan make it easier on the surviving family members or
Yeah.
others that cared for cared or cared less about the person that passed away?
I think the main thing to understand here is that if your loved ones know that that plan is in place, like this is such a huge relief, right? Like if you're going into finding out a loved one's passed away and then also finding out that, they have no will and you're not really sure, where their like wallet is or their house keys, or like it's just adding stress onto stress, right? And the list doesn't end. Like you're just all these things that you're thinking of. So I would say like having an estate plan in place that your loved ones, first of all, know that that plan is in place, having carefully, selected your executor, perhaps having arranged for a professional executor completely takes that burden off their shoulders, right? Now they can literally just dump those problems onto the professional executor that's already arranged, and they can just worry about um,
Focus on the grief.
focus on the grief, exactly. And
Hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of flurry of activity that happens immediately when someone passes away, right? And the details that the family members, should be able to focus on are, spending time with their loved ones and being surrounded by family and friends and making sure that whatever arrangements, and lots of people pre-plan their arrangements, which is also a huge relief for family members when somebody passes away. But maybe they want to just oversee it. They want to make sure that, okay, what food is there going to be? And I mean, there's a whole list of things that could potentially be important to a particular family that you want them to be able to just worry about that and only that.
Yeah, we talk about this often, but just either you pre-plan or you make sure there's enough cash,
Yeah.
liquid,
Yeah.
in order for the family to be able to pay for
Yeah.
the funeral and not have to front the money, because not everybody has 10, 15, $20,000 lying around to actually pay for the arrangements.
And I actually think most people don't even realize how much a
Costs,
funeral
yeah.
costs. Never mind like the tombstone and like all of that. Like I mean, we are talking about, I mean, it's not uncommon that it's 20,000 plus. So
Sarah, thank you so much for your thoughts here, and thank you, Kim. And we'll make sure that we reinvite Kim in the future, because that was super interesting and thoughtful and powerful. Thank you.
thanks.
Please don't forget to subscribe to the ClearEstate podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform to make sure that you have access to this podcast and all new information, new content that we may put out there. Our very, very ambitious goal is to end the end of life burdens of Canadian and American families and bring products, services, technology, and content to you to help you deal with some of these difficult issues.
Think Bait. TNKR Media. Good talk.